Hello and welcome back to Naxos Classical Spotlight. I'm Raymond Bisha. The music you just heard comes from the Suite Brasileiro No. 1 by Brazilian composer Oscar Lorenzo Fernandez, and a new recording of his piano music featuring pianist Clélia Iruzun, who is my interview guest today. I'll have that interview in a minute. First, here's a bit more of that opening music. So tell me, who was Oscar Lorenzo Fernandez?
To me, he is in a handful of the best composers we have in Brazil. He was born the same year as Francisco Mignone, and he was born 10 years after Villa-Lobos. So he's very much from that early 20th century, part of Brazilian music, which of course Villa-Lobos lived until 59 and Mignone lived until 86. Lorenzo Fernandez died young at 50 in 1948. So his career was quite a lot shorter. And sometimes I wonder what else he would have written had lived a little longer.
So how did you come upon his music? Where did you discover it first time?
The first time I played Lorenzo Fernandez, I was 7 years old. And I entered the competition in Rio, which was called Concurso Lorenzo Fernandez, which was held at the Conservato, which he founded in Rio de Janeiro, And I entered the competition and I played one of his pieces. It was called Fogueira de São João, which is São John's bonfires. And it's from a early suite, supposed to be an easy piece, but for a 7-year-old, I found it very hard because I had a lot of cross hands. I had to go pa, 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 like this, crossing the hands and quite fast notes. And I ended up winning the competition.
Okay.
And getting the special prize for the best performance of Lorenzo Fernandez, which was a surprise.
And you were how old at this point?
I was 7 years old.
Wow. So, and here you are making an album of his piano music. Is there a lot of piano music by him?
Yes, he wrote a lot of music. Many of his pieces are dedicated to the young players, to children, and are supposed to be like educational works to learn from a easier version, and then you go to something a little more advanced. But he also wrote, I chose which I think it's quite representative of his language, and also trying to get pieces from different periods, of his development as a composer. Some early works, and the last piece he composed, which is the Sonata Breve, for piano. So I think it's like a little panorama of what he wrote for piano. I hope it will be representative enough for the amount of pieces he has for piano.
How would you describe his writing style for piano?
Yeah, his writing is very sophisticated. It's quite polyphonic. There's always more than one thing going on. Like voices, that intricate sort of writing, quite hard because it still sounds very very natural in a way. So you have to keep that flowing in the natural melodic, phrases that he creates with all those voices going in between sometimes. So it's quite a lot of work to get, to a, let's say, a final product where you still sounding natural, as I say, but not missing all the sophisticated writing that he has. Yes, quite unique way of writing for piano, I would say.
Was he very involved in music education? You said that some of his pieces were intended for young players.
Yes, he did. I mean, he founded the Conservatoire in Rio, which is still there. It's still
Hmm.
there. And it's a very important institution we have in Brazil. And he also worked with Villa-Lobos with his project to include music for in schools and for children with choir. So he was very involved in education work.
That must have been an incredible time of change in classical music in Brazil with Mignone and Villa-Lobos and him.
Yes,
What was going
definitely.
on there? Was Villa-Lobos kind of the leader, or was he?
Yeah, I mean, Villa-Lobos was this figure, very flamboyant and, with a very strong personality. So he sort of led the way because he had a way to get attention of people. But I could say that maybe Mignone and Lorenzo Fernandez have worked a little harder in the end to
Right.
get things done. I don't know, maybe I'm being unfair to Villa-Lobos, but I know they have really done a lot of work for education in Brazil.
You mentioned the Suite Brasileira number one. Can you describe some of the other pieces? What comes to your mind when you play some of them? The Valsa Suburbana. I need a cocktail when I listen to that.
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, that one I played for a long time, and I have played in concerts. It's a very special piece because it's got an enormous appeal. It grows and it's so romantic in a way. And again, the writing is there, the sophisticated voicing going underneath, and it's a very hard piece to bring along because it just has this ground there on it. And then you have to get all the contrasts, right. I wish I had written more waltzes, because it's quite special one.
He was good at that.
He was good at that. Yeah, I mean, the other fantastic piece I like very much are the three studies in sonatina form. That is a very popular work. It's performed a lot in Brazil.
So that's performed a lot in Brazil. How well known is his music outside of Brazil?
Not known enough. No, not enough. I mean, I'm going to play a lot of it now that the CD is coming out. And I played already the studies in Germany in March. It went very well. I don't know, I said, what they're going to think. But they enjoyed it, and they said, "Oh, we look forward to hearing more."
Hmm.
I mean, normally I get this impression when, I mean, since my early career, when I start including Brazilian music in my concerts, sometimes just one piece here, one piece there, just trying out, see how it will go. And I always got a very, very welcome, response from the audiences. And I don't know why it's still not, performed more often.
Well, hopefully this album and a little bit this podcast will help it along. Tell me about the Sonata Breve. It's one of the last pieces he wrote.
Yes, it's one of the last piece he wrote the year before he died, in 1947. I think it shows that he was going into a new direction in a way, and it's a lot the language is a lot more, let's say, modern in a way, and he uses really extreme effects in the piano, and when the dynamics go really crazy. He goes to double, four fortes, sometimes
Hmm.
fortissimo, fortissimo, sort of thing. And then suddenly he goes down, and it's a very difficult work. It's very difficult work to perform. It is the kind of piece that you have to go for it because it's full of jumps, and you have just to hope for the best and go for it, because otherwise it can sound like an excuse. It shouldn't sound like an excuse. Sorry, it is hard. No, you have to really go for it.
It
And
must be very dramatic to watch you play it.
yeah, I think it is a piece that's good to look at the performer as well, to see the effort we're doing. And know the movements up and down the piano.
Tell me a bit about the Notturno. That's the earliest piece on this album, right?
Yeah, I think there is also the two miniatures, which is also very early. I mean, the two miniatures are, in a way, already a very good introduction to his piano language. Again, quite virtuoso and light. But the Nocturne is again is a early work, but it's already quite complex, the writing of it, because of the dynamics grow and come back. And on the other hand, you have to keep that movement, that flowing, going, and still do all the different dynamic, contrasts to it. It is I mean, I found it especially difficult to make it, like to keep the unity of the piece in a way, because it does move quite a bit to different things and comes back, and yet it is always that the left hand is almost like the same movement throughout it, but there's so much going on top of it. They have to keep that. Don't forget, it is a nocturne after all, not become something that you go too passionate sometimes, because I think that how he was. He had these extremes, in the music that it sometimes you have to work to see how you deal with that and keep the unity of the piece.
You wrote the liner notes for the album, which are very nice. I enjoyed them. You include a quote from him that he wrote or said in an interview in 1942, which is in the middle of the Second World War. He talks about there will be a burnout of the chaos and decadence, above all of on European musical tendencies. And then he talks about that the world will endeavor to rebuild itself on better ideals. And I read that and I thought, he's talking about now.
Isn't it? We sort of doing a U-turn, aren't we, in a way? But it's true. It's true. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I may sound a bit simplistic by saying it, but when I listen to pieces, new pieces, I always have that idea that I hear it and I say, do I want to hear it again? It's sort of a way of judging it simplistically. And many pieces that you listen and you don't really understand it. Maybe you need to make an effort, and sometimes there are things that work, and I start liking more. It grows on you in a way. But I think that first impression of a piece, of like a melodic line or an interesting rhythm, something that will catch your attention, I think it's very important, and I think maybe that's the reason why some music is so loved, and you say, oh, nobody wants to hear Rachmaninoff number 2 again. But why? There must be a reason why some pieces are so popular, isn't it? I grew listening to this music, and to me it was very special to record this Lorenzo Fernandez music, something I wanted to do for a long time. But I just hope that, the effort we are doing with all the project of Naxos and all the performers that are bringing this Latin American music to light of the audiences, that we will encourage the new generations to be a little curious and maybe, look at these pieces and say, oh, maybe I will play one of the suites, the Brazilian suites, or I'll play the waltz, the valsa suburbana, because I think it's important that this piece goes out of Brazil, it goes into the world. And I mean, my dream is to see this repertoire going to the mainstream, repertoire, belonging to, like I play Russian music, I play French music. Why can't my British colleagues here play Brazilian music? So the same way we look elsewhere, isn't it?
That was Ocaso from Preludios do Crepúsculo, composed just over 100 years ago by Lorenzo Fernandez. All of the music in this podcast was written by Lorenzo Fernandez and is wonderfully played by Brazilian pianist Clélia Iruzun on the Naxos label, catalog number 8.574593. It's part of Naxos's Music of Brazil series. Hopefully this recording will encourage more pianists outside Brazil to explore his music. That's all for this podcast. To go out, here's the final movement of his 3 studies with lush harmonies and fingers flying in all directions. I'm Raymond Bisha. Thanks for joining me. So long for now.